Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and happy Halloween. We are here for a spectacular tale of creepiness and a little bit of hellfire for good measure. Because it is our Halloween special, and we do love Halloween here at the Ramblings. We've already gone through a couple entries here discussing some pop culture-ness. Now we're going to do something that, because it's Halloween and you need that extra thrill, is real. That's right, folks. We are foregoing Hollywood because this is a story that is 100% factual, but because we are Roulette Productions, and this is Friday Ramblings, and we love our entertainment, there is a little bit entertainment-based inspiration. We're going to touch it at the end, just to keep things from going not too far off track. That's right, folks. We're going to discuss the most famous ghost town in the United States. We are going to discuss Centralia, Pennsylvania, a location that is one of several sites around the world that are affectionately referred to as an entryway to hell. First things first, let's go ahead and address a couple issues, and that is, what is a ghost town? A ghost town, also called deserted city, extinct town, or abandoned city, although ghost town is my favorite phrase, because ghosty, is an abandoned settlement, usually one that contains substantial visible remaining buildings and infrastructure such as roads. There's many reasons for ghost towns to exist, and such can be because economic activity that supported it has failed or ended for a particular reason, or because of natural or human-caused disasters such as floods, prolonged droughts, extreme heat or extreme cold, uncontrolled lawlessness, or pollution, or nuclear and radiation-related accidents and incidents, such as our friend, the Chernobyl city in Russia, which has a few more centuries before it's going to be safe for anybody to live in it. You can't even visit it for more than an hour or two, even with proper radiation equipment. But that is a story for another time. Now, some ghost towns, especially those that preserve period-specific architecture, have become tourist attractions. Some examples are Bannock, Montana, Oatman, Arizona, Barkerville, British Columbia, Krakoa and Pompeii in Italy, Villa Epesión in Argentina. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Forlandia in Brazil. Again, apologies if I pronounced that wrong. And various others. So with that in mind, let's touch on what Centralia was before things went bad. Centralia was a coal mining town. Technically still is, as the city does still exist technically. But Centralia was founded as a coal mining settlement, settled in 1841 as Bull's Head, before being incorporated into the borough of Centralia in 1866, and in a lovely bit of foreshadowing, if you are a literature type person, founded by Jonathan Faust. Yes, Faust is a common surname in certain parts of the world, but still, it has literary significance of a satanic nature. Feel free to look it up if you don't know the reference. This is Wonderful Things. As we said, it was primarily settled or rather continue to perpetuate, because of coal in the region, specifically anthracite coal, known as hard coal and black coal, a hard, compact variety of coal that has a submetallic luster and has the highest carbon content, fewest impurities, and therefore highest energy density of all types of coal, and thus is the most valuable variant of coal. For those of you who are not scientific minded, basically what we're saying here is there was a metric F-ton of the purest, hottest burning, and therefore most energy releasing kind of coal there is underneath Centralia. Thus, people wanted to mine it and make some money. Nothing wrong there yet. Quiet kitty. Spooky kitty. Eventually, they built the Mine Run Railroad in 1854 to transport coal out of the valley. The original two mines were the Locust Run Mine and the Coal Ridge Mine. Various mines would follow throughout the 1800s. And eventually, Alexander Ray, the town's founder, before it was Centralia, when it was still Bull's Head. I know, it got a little weird there. That's why we threw all that out at the beginning. But Alexander Ray was murdered in his buggy by members of the Molly Maguires, which was an Irish 19th century secret society, best known for their activism among Irish American and Irish immigrant coal miners in Pennsylvania. 3 men were eventually convicted of his death and were hanged in the county seat of Bloomsburg. Several other murders and incidents of arson also took place during this violent period, as Centralia was a hotbed of Molly Maguire's activity during the 1860s, as they sought to organize a mine workers' union in order to improve wages and working conditions. A legend among locals in Centralia tells that Father Daniel Ignatius McDermott, the first Roman Catholic priest to call Centralia home, cursed the land in retaliation for being assaulted by 3 members of the Maguires in 1869. McDermott said there would be a day when St. Ignatius Roman Catholic Church would be the only structure remaining in Centralia. Many of the Molly Maguires leaders were hanged in 1877, ending their crimes. Although legends persist, a number of descendants of the Molly Maguires still lived in Centralia up until the 1980s. The maximum population of Centralia was 2,761 in 1890, and at its peak the town had 7 churches, 5 hotels, 27 saloons, 2 theaters, a bank, post office, and 14 general and grocery stores. 37 years later, the production of anthracite coal had reached its peak in Pennsylvania. Production would decline, though, when many young miners enlisted in the military during World War I. So, you're looking at a maximum population of 2,761 people. By modern standards, that is not a lot of people. This was a small town. This was a mining town. Important to keep in mind. That this is not a big place where there's plenty of cops and a variety of businesses. This was a town built off coal mining, and as we've already seen, the coal led to violence and murder. The Wall Street crash of 1929, a little bit historical thing. Some of you may have heard of it. Resulting in the Lehigh Valley Coal Company closing 5 of its Centralia local mines. Bootleg miners continued mining in several idle mines, using techniques such as what was called pillar robbing, where miners would extract coal from coal pillars left in mines to support their roofs. This caused a collapse in many idle mines, further complicating the prevention of the mine fire that would occur in later decades. Jumping ahead though. Efforts to seal off the abandoned mines ran into the collapsed areas. In 1950, the Centralia Council acquired the rights to all anthracite coal beneath Centralia through a state law passed in 1949 that enabled the transaction. That year, the federal census counted 1,986 residents in Centralia. Thus, coal mining continued until the 1960s, when most of the companies shut down, although bootleg mining continued until 1982. Rail service, however, ended in 1966. Now here's where we get to the real fun, folks. Here's where things really get bad. On May 27, 1962, which is a debated date, but it's the best date we can estimate, a coal seam fire began underneath Centralia, Pennsylvania, United States. The most commonly believed theory as to the cause of the fire came about when on May 7th, the Centralia Council met to discuss the approaching Memorial Day and how the town would go about cleaning up the Centralia landfill, which had been introduced earlier that year. The 300-foot wide, 75-foot long pit was made up of a 50-foot deep strip mine that had been cleared by Edward Whitney in 1935 and came very close to the northeast corner of Oddfellows Cemetery. At that point, there was 8 illegal dumps spread about Centralia, and the council's intention in creating the landfill was to stop the illegal dumping, as new state regulations had forced the town to close an earlier dump west of St. Ignatius Cemetery. Remember, we're talking the 60s, when things like environmentalism really first started picking up in America. And, various states kind of started really coming down on, look, kind of control where you're putting things. Important context. Pennsylvania passed precautionary law in 1956 to regulate landfill use in strip mines, as landfills were known to cause destructive mine fires. The law required a permit and regular inspection for a municipality to use such a pit. George Sigaratis, a regional landfill inspector who worked for the Department of Mines and Mineral Industries, became concerned about the pit when he noticed holes in the walls and floor, as such mines often cut through older mines underneath. Sigaratis informed Joseph Teague, a Centralia councilman, that the pit will require filling with an incombustible material. This is often a clay barrier that you place in between layers as you fill up the landfill. Put a clay barrier on the bottom, put some trash in, do another clay barrier, put a few layers of trash. That way, if anything in the landfill caught fire accidentally, it would hit the clay barrier after so many feet. Even if it got hot enough, God forbid, to eat through the clay, it would, in theory, have multiple layers of clay to get through. By the time it got through that, and really, unless it gets super hot, it's not supposed to, people would be able to get there and put the fire out. That is the whole theory behind what they were talking about, how the landfill should have been built. Town council arranged for cleanup of the strip mine dump. The council minutes do not describe the proposed procedure. It is summarized that the process, which was to set the trash on fire, bad. So the whole point of these regulations is to discourage fire from being at the landfill to begin with, and not to do it until you have the thing set up, which they didn't have yet, because they had to be warned to do it, was not specified because state law prohibited dump fires. Nonetheless, the Centralia Council set a date and hired 5 members of the volunteer fire company to clean up the landfill. Fire was ignited to clean the dump on May 27, 1962, and water was used to douse the visible flames at night. However, flames were seen once more on May 29th. Using hoses hooked up from Locust Avenue, another attempt was made to douse the fire that night. And the flare-up in the following week caused the Centralia Fire Company to once again douse it with hoses. A bulldozer stirred up the garbage so that firemen could douse concealed layers of the burning waste. A few days later, a hole as wide as 15 feet and several feet high was found in the base of the north wall of the pit. Garbage had concealed the hole and prevented it from being filled with incombustible material. Bad news. It is possible that this hole led to the mine fire, as it provided a pathway to the labyrinth of old mines under the borough. Evidence indicates that despite these efforts to douse the fire, the landfill continued to burn. Again, anybody that's ever done a small controlled burn in like a fire pit of their trash knows that certain materials, such as paper, cardboard, tend to smolder and take a while to die down. And it is a lot easier, especially if there's any wood involved, to restart a fire after it's been allegedly burned out than to start a brand new one. On July 2nd, Monsignor William J. Burke complained about foul odors from the smoldering trash and coal reaching St. Ignatius Church. Even then, though, the Centralia Council still allowed the dumping of garbage into the pit. Eventually, Clarence Cashner, the president of the Independent Miners, Brakermen, and Truckers Union, came at the invitation of a council member to inspect the situation in Centralia. Cashner evaluated events, called Gordon Smith, an engineer of the Department of Mines and Mineral Industries office in Pottsville. Smith told the town that he could dig out the smoldering material using a steam shovel for $175. Now remember, this is in early 1960s money. This is a bit, more money by today's standards. A call was placed to Art Joyce, a mine inspector from Mount Carmel, who brought gas detection equipment for use on the swirling wisp of steam now emanating from ground fissures in the north wall of the landfill pit. Tests concluded the gases seeping from the large hole in the pit wall contained carbon monoxide concentrations typical of coal mine fires. This is a big red flag. Carbon monoxide inhalation will kill you. The Centralia Council eventually sent a letter to the Lehigh Valley Coal Company as formal notice of the fire. It speculated the town council had decided that hiding the true origin of the fire would serve better than alerting the LVCC of the truth, which would most likely end in receiving no help from them. In the letter, the borough described the starting of a fire of unknown origin during a period of unusually hot weather. Proceeding an August 6th meeting at the fire site, Deputy Secretary of Mines James Schuber Sr. expected that the representatives would inform him they could not afford mounting a project that would stop the mine fire. Therefore, Schuber announced that he expected the state to finance the cost of digging out the fire, which at that time was around $30,000, roughly equivalent to $302,000 in 2023. Another offer was made at the meeting, proposed by Centralia strip mine operator Alonzo Sanchez, who told members of council that he would dig out the mine fire free of charge as long as he could claim any coal he recovered without paying royalties to the Lehigh Valley Coal Company. Part of Sanchez's plan was to do exploratory drilling to estimate the scope of the mine fire, which was most likely why Sanchez's offer was rejected at the meeting. Drilling would have delayed the project, not to mention legal problem mining rights. At the time, inspectors were in the Centralia area mines almost daily to check for lethal levels of carbon monoxide. Lethal levels were found on August 9th, and all Centralia area mines were closed the next day. Now, here is where it gets fun and it gets scary. Despite repeated attempts at excavation using various techniques, the fire kept burning. And the heat kept igniting coal deposits and coal dust and gases strewn throughout the mines that ran throughout the entire town. This fire started in 1962. It kept burning. It kept burning throughout the 60s. It kept burning throughout the 70s. In 1979, locals became aware of the scale of the problem when a gas station owner, then Mayor John Coddington, inserted a dipstick into one of his underground tanks to check the fuel level. When he withdrew it, it seemed a little hot. He lowered a thermometer into the tank on a string and was shocked to discover that the temperature of the gasoline in the tank was 172 degrees Fahrenheit. That is too hot. 172 degrees Fahrenheit. That will harm you. For reference, the upper temperature limitations that a human body can survive is between 104 and 122 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside his tank was 172. That means it would have killed somebody with 50 degrees left over just for overkill. The underground of Centralia was already turning into hell. Burning hot. You will have nothing left but your soul if you're in the middle of it. Hell. In 1979. 17 years of burning. Statewide attention to the fire began to increase, culminating on February 14, 1981, when a 12-year-old resident fell into a sinkhole 4 feet by 150 feet deep that suddenly opened beneath his feet in his grandmother's backyard, but saved himself by grabbing onto a tree root. His cousin pulled him out of the hole to safety. The plume of hot steam billowing from the hole was tested and found to contain a lethal level of carbon monoxide. At the time of the sinkhole collapse, the governor and U.S. representative were visiting the town to assess the area. Although there was physical, visible evidence of the fire, residents of Centralia were bitterly divided over the question of whether or not the fire posed a direct threat to the town. Some of those citizens were obviously stupid. A sinkhole belching lethal levels of carbon monoxide opened up randomly in somebody's backyard. After it had been burning at this point for 19 years. Some people want to die. Historians have identified at least 6 community groups, each organized around varying interpretations of the amount and kind of risk posed by the fire. In 1983, the U.S. Congress allocated more than $42 million for relocation efforts. Again, the the federal Congress at this point is going, 21 years, this fire's been burning under your town. It's belching lethal smoke and opening up sinkholes into a fire that is hot enough it will cook you before anybody could rescue you if you fell all the way down into it. Yeah, when the federal government says, look, the state of Pennsylvania cannot deal with this, that is an emergency. When Congress is spending over $42 million to pay people to leave, that is an emergency. That is hell on earth coming for you. Not $42 million to deal with it so the town can continue to exist and people can have an economy, but $42 million to just say, nope, we're gone. Just everybody get out. Nearly all the residents accepted the government's buyout offers. More than 1,000 people moved out of town and 500 structures were demolished. By 1990, the census recorded 63 remaining residents. In 1992, Pennsylvania Governor Bob Casey invoked eminent domain on all property in the borough. Eminent domain basically says that in extreme emergency cases, the federal government has the right to seize private property to encourage people to not stay on that property. Now, note, again, this is done primarily with the theory that this is to aid people. You know, we'll buy the property from you, you can have the profits, you can move away from this area that you don't need to be in. At times, eminent domain has been used for less ethical reasons. And this is going to kind of figure into the handful of stubborn residents. Subsequent legal effort by residents to overturn the action failed as they accused the government of wanting to seize all the private property in Centralia so they would have legal rights to the coal that had not yet burned up underground. Because again, it is the most valuable of all coal and there's still a ton of it under there. 2002, the U.S. Postal Service discontinued Centralia's zip code, which means, again, the federal government, specifically the post office system, is saying that this town no longer exists. We're not sending anybody in there to deliver mail. Anybody left in there does not need mail. That's not a thing that happens normally. Post office doesn't like doing that. Only 16 homes were still standing by 2006, which was reduced to 11 by 2009, when Governor Ed Rendell began the formal eviction of the remaining Centralia residents. Only 5 homes remained by 2010. Eventually, in 2013, the remaining residents settled the lawsuit, which included claiming the condemnation was no longer needed because the underground fire had moved and the air quality in the borough was the same as that in nearby Lancaster, Pennsylvania. The remaining residents received $218,000 in compensation for the value of their homes and the right to stay in their homes for the rest of their lives. There is, as of 2020, only a handful of residents remaining in Centralia stubbornly. Clearly, they're not living a very good life. And when I say a handful, I do mean a handful. Like there is, the 2020 census said there were 5 people. And when those 5 people die, the government will formally and officially seize the last of the private property in the borough of Centralia, and it will be officially declared a place people are not going to live because the coal fire still burns. It started in 1962. In 2024, 62 years later, it is still burning. As of 2006, it was reported is expected to do so for another 250 years. That means 2,256 is the best estimate we have for when Centralia will stop burning underground. That is messed up. If it makes it an extra 6 years, which would be 2,262. That would make it an even 300 years of burning and belching of poisonous, lethal gases. That's messed up. That is something that, I mean, how do you write that? How do you create a fiction that is more holy WTF than that? So with that in mind, let's discuss the fiction. Centralia, with its buckling, cracking roads, belching poisonous smoke, perpetual just smoky air, and the knowledge that it's going to burn well past the lifespan of anybody still alive, and their kids, and their grandkids, and potentially their great-grandkids. That's... like, we can't put it out. We cannot find a guaranteed way to put this fire out. That is how hot it burns. How persistent a burn it is. This is a fire humanity has no control over. And while we may have technically started it by setting fire to the landfill, what has continued to burn is the coal that was underground, that was naturally formed. This is a fire we cannot put out, we cannot control the spread of, that belches out carbon monoxide, which will kill a person, that burns hot enough. You have 0% chance of surviving it if you fall in there and the flames touch you. There is no other way you could describe hell than that. And it was all caused by nature. We lit the spark, but fire exists in nature. Coal exists in nature. A potentially 300-year burn. That just happens. We didn't have to spend years planning how to set that up. No, it just happened. Because people were stupid and did not respect. As such, Centralia has been used as a model for many different fictional ghost towns and manifestations of hell. Prominent examples include Dean Koontz's Strange Highways, David Wellington's Vampire Zero, and screenwriter Roger Avary, who used Centralia for his cinematic interpretation of the town of Silent Hill from the famous video game franchise. Yes, that's right, folks. A literal horror movie. The screenwriter looked at Centralia and said, yeah, I want to come up with a ghost town that is so psychologically scarring to walk through and freaky that it will bring one of the most famous horror movie games ever invented to life for people that don't even know the video game. Yeah, Centralia. Not to mention the dark comedy movie Nothing But Trouble, whose fictional town of Vulcanvania was heavily influenced by the story of Centralia. And many, many other examples, including various references in songs and documentaries. People continue to document Centralia because it is that crazy. Now, Centralia has been a bit of a tourist attraction because, people can't believe it when they hear it. I mean, I've been talking to you about it for over half an hour now. And I'm pretty sure some of y'all are like, dude, it can't be that bad. Like, it cannot be the closest thing we can ever create without confirming absolute existence of the devil to hell on earth. And people go there and they're like, yeah, it is. That's the point, folks. Here on Halloween, I gotta say, I love fiction. We've discussed many, many horror, from classic literature stories to modern horror films, to even a couple video games. And I gotta say, the idea of walking through Centralia, knowing that just a couple layers of soil and road is all that exists between me and a centuries-long burning fire that refuses all human intervention and will take your life if it feels like it, whether through flame or gas, that scares me more than any movie ever could. It scares me more than any video game ever could. This Halloween, I'm going to have to say, Centralia, Pennsylvania, when it comes to truth being scarier than fiction, the truth wins. Hope you've had a wonderful October and that you enjoy the rest of Halloween. Don't worry though, the Friday Ramblings will be back because we've got more entertainment to discuss. We will return in November and December for some of your regularly scheduled programming. For now, all I can suggest is, on Halloween night, leave the lights on. Because it's a pretty good chance something's hiding under your bed.